You want to talk about operational risk? Try this on. Recruiting the daughter of a Stasi counterintelligence officer in the middle of East Berlin during the height of the goddamn Cold War. That's the kind of operation that'll get you killed 3 different ways before breakfast if you screw it up even a little bit. I'm talking about the late 70s, when the wall was still fresh concrete and barbed wire, when the Stasi had more informants per capita than any intelligence service in human history, when every third person you talked to was reporting back to Norman Enstrasse. The Ministry for State Security, Stasi, had perfected the art of turning citizens into watchers, neighbor watching neighbor, wife watching husband, children watching parents. And here I was, working under business development consultant cover import-export opportunities between Western firms and potential East German partners, trying to recruit the daughter of one of their own senior officers. Her name was Christina, 26 years old. Worked as a translator at the East German Foreign Ministry, fluent in English, Russian, French, smart as hell. Beautiful in that severe Eastern European way, high cheekbones, ice blue eyes, dark hair pulled back tight. And her father, Colonel Heinz Richter, Stasi Hauptverwaltung Aufklärung, Main Directorate for Reconnaissance, Foreign Intelligence. The real deal. You're probably thinking, why the hell would I even consider this? Why would anyone in their right mind try to flip someone that close to the apparatus? Here's why. Because she had access. Direct, immediate, actionable access to foreign intelligence operations, to personnel files, to operational planning, and because sometimes the people closest to the machine are the ones who hate it most. I'd been in Berlin for 8 months when I first saw her. It was at a cultural reception at the Palace of the Republic, one of those East German propaganda showcases where they trotted out their achievements in the arts to try to prove they weren't a gray, miserable police state, which they absolutely were. She was translating for a delegation of French diplomats, moving between German, French, and Russian without missing a beat. I watched her work for maybe 20 minutes before I even approached. Watched how she carried herself, watched how she interacted with the Stasi minders who were everywhere in that room, watched how her eyes went dead whenever she looked at them. That's what caught my attention. Not her language skills, not her position, that look in her eyes when she thought no one was watching, that flicker of pure contempt. I'd seen it before, in Hungary, in Czechoslovakia, in Poland. That look that says, I know exactly what this system is, and I hate every goddamn piece of it. But knowing someone might be vulnerable and actually recruiting them? 2 completely different operations. Especially when her father probably had a file on every Western intelligence officer who'd ever set foot in East Berlin. Especially when one wrong move would get her sent to Hohenschönhausen prison for interrogation that would make waterboarding look like a spa treatment. The operational calculus was brutal. The payoff was enormous, the risk was total, and I'd been doing this long enough to know that sometimes the highest risk assets deliver the highest value intelligence, so I started the approach. Not that night, that would have been amateur hour bullshit, but over the next 3 months, at carefully selected venues where Western businessmen and East German officials actually mixed, cultural events, trade fairs, academic symposiums, always professional, always brief, always in public where the Stasi watchers could see everything was above board, building familiarity, building trust, building the foundation for what would eventually become one of the most productive agent relationships I ever ran. The recruitment itself, that's the story, the tactical operation of turning a Stasi officer's daughter into an American intelligence asset in the middle of the most surveilled city in the world. The tradecraft required to make it work without getting her killed and me expelled or worse. Because here's what you need to understand about East Berlin in the 70s. It wasn't just dangerous. It was precision dangerous. Every move calculated, every word measured, every meeting planned down to the minute. One mistake and the whole thing collapses. One surveillance team you don't spot and everyone involved is goddamn finished. But when it works, when you successfully recruit someone with that level of access in that kind of environment, you change the operational landscape. You gain insight into enemy planning that can't be obtained any other way. You turn their strength into your advantage. That's what Christina became. And this is how it happened. The first real conversation happened at an East German industrial trade exhibition in April of '78. I'd been laying groundwork for 3 months, establishing myself as a legitimate business consultant, building my cover so deep that even if the Stasi ran a full background investigation, they'd find exactly what they were supposed to find. I represented myself as working for a consortium of Western European firms looking to explore manufacturing partnerships, import-export development. Nothing sexy, nothing that screamed intelligence operation. Just boring commercial development that gave me a reason to be in East Berlin regularly and attend events where foreign ministry personnel showed up. Christina was there translating for a delegation from Moscow. I positioned myself near her during a break, holding a glass of terrible East German white wine that tasted like it'd been filtered through a carburetor. "Your Russian is excellent," I said in German. "Simple opening, professional, nothing that would raise flags." She looked at me with those ice blue eyes, assessing, calculating. "Thank you. And your German has a Bavarian accent hidden under American pronunciation." Smart, very goddamn smart. She'd identified that I'd learned German somewhere in southern Germany, probably from a native speaker, but was trying to mask it with standard Hochdeutsch. That kind of linguistic awareness meant she was trained to listen for details, which meant she was dangerous. "Guilty," I said. "I studied in Munich years ago, business school. And now you're here looking for manufacturing partnerships in the workers' paradise?" There was the slightest edge to that last phrase, not quite sarcasm, not quite mockery, just enough to signal awareness. "I'm here because there are opportunities," I said. "And because I find East Berlin fascinating." Fascinating. She repeated the word like she was tasting something bitter. That's a diplomatic choice of words. We talked for maybe 10 minutes. Surface-level conversation about trade policy, manufacturing capabilities, the challenges of East-West commercial relationships. But underneath the words, we were both running a different conversation. I was assessing her receptivity. She was assessing my intentions. When she excused herself to return to her delegation, she'd given me nothing concrete. But she hadn't shut me down either. That was progress. Over the next 6 weeks, I engineered 4 more encounters. Always at official events, always in controlled environments where surveillance was expected and my behavior was entirely appropriate for my cover. At a symposium on East-West cultural exchange, we discussed literature. She mentioned Solzhenitsyn in East Germany, where merely owning the Gulag archipelago could get you investigated. That was a signal. At a reception for a visiting Yugoslav trade delegation, she made a comment about official truths versus actual realities. Another signal. At an academic conference on European economic development, she asked me if I'd ever read 1984 in English, the banned book, the forbidden text that described exactly what the Stasi had built. That was more than a signal. That was a goddamn flare. But I still couldn't make the direct approach. Not yet, because her father was Colonel Heinz Richter, and Colonel Richter didn't get to his position by being stupid. If I rushed this, if I spooked her, if I gave her any reason to report the contact to her handlers, because she absolutely had handlers, everyone in her position did, then the whole operation collapsed. So I waited. I built trust through consistency. I demonstrated that I was exactly what my cover said I was. A Western businessman interested in commercial development who happened to enjoy intelligent conversation with a well-educated East German translator. The operational principle here is patience. Recruitment operations aren't about dramatic moments in dark alleys. They're about building relationships over time until the target feels safe enough to take the next step, until they trust you enough to cross the line. The breakthrough came in late June. There was a reception at the Soviet embassy, East German officials kissing Moscow's ass, Western businessmen pretending commercial relationships were possible under communist economic planning. everyone drinking too much vodka and saying things they'd regret. I saw Christina standing alone near the embassy gardens, smoking a cigarette, looking at the wall visible in the distance. The sun was setting around 8:30, casting long shadows across the compound. I walked over with 2 glasses of vodka. "You look like you could use one of these," I said. She took the glass without looking at me. "Do you know what my father does?" Direct question, testing question, the kind of question that signals we're moving past surface conversation into something more dangerous. "I know he works for the government," I said carefully. "Ministry for State Security, Hauptverwaltung Aufklärung," she said. "Foreign intelligence. He recruits spies. He identifies Western intelligence officers. He builds operations to compromise enemy assets." She turned and looked at me directly. "So I know exactly what you are." This was the moment, the decision point. I could deny everything, maintain cover, walk away and abandon the operation, or I could trust my assessment of her motivations and move forward. I chose forward. "Then you know I'm not going to insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise," I said quietly. "And you know that if you were going to report this conversation, you would have done it already." "Maybe I'm gathering more evidence," she said, but there was no heat in it, no threat, just exhaustion. "You're not," I said, "because you're not your father, and you don't believe in what he's building." She smoked in silence for maybe a minute. Around us, the reception continued. Soviet diplomats, East German officials, Stasi watchers, all of them oblivious to what was happening in this corner of the garden. "I want you to understand something," she finally said. "My father is a true believer. He genuinely thinks the Stasi protects the people. He thinks surveillance is safety. He thinks informants create trust. He's built his entire identity around this system." "And you?" I asked. "I've watched them destroy people," she said. Her voice was flat, factual. "I've watched them arrest neighbors for jokes. I've watched them separate families for suspicion. I've watched them turn this city into a prison where everyone watches everyone else and no one is safe." She dropped the cigarette and crushed it under her heel. "So yes, I know what you are, and I know what you want. And I need you to understand that if I do this, if I cross this line, I'm not doing it for your government. I'm doing it because I want to hurt them. The system, the apparatus, everything my father has spent his life building." That's when I knew I had her. Not because she wanted to help America, not because she believed in Western democracy, but because she wanted revenge against the machine that had turned her country into a surveillance state. And sometimes that's the strongest motivation you can find. "We should talk," I said. "Somewhere private, somewhere safe." "There is no safe in East Berlin," she said. "But there are places less dangerous than others." The first operational meeting happened 2 weeks later in a Protestant church in Prenzlauer Berg. Churches were one of the few places in East Berlin where the Stasi's surveillance was slightly less absolute. Not absent, never goddamn absent, but reduced. The Lutheran Church had maintained a delicate independence that gave them some operational breathing room. St. Elizabeth's Church, small congregation, afternoon service on a Wednesday around 3 o'clock when working people couldn't attend, maybe 15 people scattered across the pews. Me in the back, Christina arriving 10 minutes after the service started, taking a seat 3 rows ahead. We didn't acknowledge each other, didn't speak, just sat through a 40-minute sermon about forgiveness and redemption while I watched for surveillance teams and she pretended to pray. After the service, I walked north toward Schönhauser Allee. She walked south toward the U-Bahn station. 30 minutes later, we were both at the Pergamon Museum on Museum Island, lost in the crowds of tourists examining ancient Babylonian artifacts. That's where we had the conversation. "Tell me what you have access to," I said quietly, standing in front of the Ishtar Gate while she examined a display case nearby. "Foreign Ministry translation pool," she said without looking at me. "Documents, cables, intelligence summaries going between Moscow and East Berlin, operational reports from Stasi foreign intelligence stations, Personnel files for East German officials working abroad. How much can you photograph? I don't know yet. I've never tried, but I can access the document room during lunch hours when the senior staff is gone. I can check out files for translation purposes. I have authorization that most translators don't. Because of your father, I said. Because of my father. They trust me completely. I'm Stasi royalty. Colonel Richter's brilliant daughter who speaks 4 languages and serves the state faithfully. There was absolute contempt in her voice. We spent the next hour establishing operational protocols, dead drops, communication systems, photography procedures, safety signals, emergency exfiltration plans if the operation was compromised. I taught her basic document photography using a Monox camera, the classic spy tool, small enough to hide in a coat pocket, simple enough to use quickly. Showed her how to position documents for optimal clarity, how to work fast, how to avoid leaving evidence of photography. You photograph the document page by page. I said, never remove anything from its file, never disturb the original order. If someone checks the file after you're done, it should look exactly like it did before you touched it. How often, she asked. Once a week, maybe twice if the material is exceptional. More than that increases the risk exponentially. The Stasi might not notice missing documents immediately, but they absolutely notice patterns of access. She understood. This woman was smart, intelligent smart, and operationally smart. She grasped the tradecraft intuitively. What do you want most, she asked. What's the priority? Anything related to Western intelligence penetrations, operations against NATO, recruitment of West German officials, Soviet intelligence activities coordinated through East Berlin. Think strategically. What would hurt them most if we knew it? Everything, she said simply. Knowing everything would hurt them most. Then give me everything you can safely access. We established our first dead drop location, a loose brick in a cemetery wall at Dorotheenstädtischer Friedhof, the historic graveyard where Bertolt Brecht was buried. Christina would leave exposed film canisters hidden behind the brick every Sunday afternoon around 4 o'clock. I'd retrieve them Monday morning around 10:30. The second drop was in Treptower Park, hidden inside a hollowed-out tree stump near the Soviet War Memorial. Backup location if the primary was compromised. Communication signals were simple. If she needed emergency contact, she'd wear a red scarf to work. If I needed to abort the operation, I'd leave a chalk mark on a specific lamppost near Alexanderplatz. If either of us suspected surveillance compromise, we'd stay completely dark for 2 weeks minimum. What happens if they catch me, she asked. Simple question. Legitimate concern. They'll interrogate you at Hohenschönhausen. Isolation, psychological torture. They won't beat you. Your father's position protects you from that, but they'll break you mentally, make you confess, make you implicate everyone you've ever known. Then they'll either execute you or give you 25 years in prison. I didn't sugarcoat it. She needed to understand the stakes. And what will you do? She asked. Try to get you out if there's any warning. But if you're arrested suddenly, there's nothing I can do. You'll be on your own. She nodded, accepted it. This woman had operational courage most trained intelligence officers never develop. One more thing, I said. Your motivation. I need to understand it completely. Because if this is about money or adventure or some romantic notion of spying, you need to walk away now. Those motivations fail under pressure. I told you already, she said. I want to hurt them. Not good enough. I need specifics. What did they do? What made you hate the system enough to risk your life? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ancient Babylonian tiles. I had a friend, she finally said. Anna, we grew up together. Both daughters of party officials, both smart, both believers. At least we thought we were believers back then. What happened? Anna fell in love with a West German student who visited East Berlin on a cultural exchange. They wrote letters, innocent letters, love letters, dreams about the future. The Stasi intercepted them, read them, decided Anna was a security risk because she'd expressed interest in visiting the West someday. Christina's voice went flat, mechanical. They arrested her. 3 a.m, black van, gone. Her parents, good party members, loyal servants of the state, tried to intervene. The Stasi told them their daughter was a traitor. They held her at Hohenschönhausen for 6 months. Interrogation, isolation. When they finally released her, she was broken, completely goddamn broken. Couldn't function, couldn't work, ended up in a psychiatric facility. And your father, I asked? My father said Stasi had done the right thing, said Anna had betrayed the state, said the punishment was appropriate, defended the whole fucking thing. There it was. The real motivation. Not ideology, not money. Personal betrayal by the system that destroyed someone she loved while her father defended it. That's when I understood, she said. This isn't about protecting people. This is about control through terror. And I want to destroy it. Every piece of it, every file, every operation, every smug bastard who thinks surveillance equals safety. That's when I knew this operation would work. Because she wasn't operating from hope or principle. She was operating from rage. Cold, focused, operational rage. And that doesn't break under pressure. Then let's destroy them, I said. One document at a time. The first film canister showed up at the cemetery, dead dropped 3 days later. 12 frames. Documents from the Foreign Ministry translation pool. East German intelligence summary of NATO military exercises in West Germany. Assessment of West German political vulnerabilities. Names of suspected CIA officers operating under diplomatic cover in Bonn. Good intelligence. Solid operational material. But relatively low level, exactly what you'd expect from a new asset testing the system. I met with Christina 4 days later at the Tierpark Berlin, East Berlin's zoo, another location where surveillance was diluted by crowds. We walked separately through the animal exhibits, communicating in brief exchanges when no one was in earshot. The film was good, I told her near the elephant enclosure. Quality was excellent. Content was valuable. That was nothing, she said. I have access to better. Show me. The second canister arrived the following Sunday. 24 frames this time. Diplomatic cables between East German intelligence and Soviet handlers. Operational plans for penetrating West German government ministries. A list of East German citizens recruited as informants during travel to Western countries. Better. Much better. The third canister was when things got serious. 36 frames. Complete personnel files for Stasi officers operating under diplomatic cover across Western Europe. Communications intercepts from West German intelligence services, and the crown jewel, a comprehensive overview of Soviet active measures operations coordinated through East Berlin. That last document alone was worth the entire operation. It detailed how the Soviets were using East German intelligence assets to conduct influence operations, spread disinformation, and manipulate Western media. Names, dates, methods, targets. Washington went ballistic when they saw it, in a good way. This was penetration-level intelligence that would normally require years to develop, and we were getting it on a weekly basis from a single asset. But success brings risk. The more valuable the intelligence, the more dangerous the operation becomes, because eventually someone at the Stasi would notice that operational plans were being compromised, that assets were being rolled up based on information that could only come from inside sources, that the Americans seemed to know too goddamn much about East German and Soviet intelligence activities, and when that happened, they'd start looking for the leak. I'd seen it before. Successful penetration operations that collapsed because the intelligence was too good and counterintelligence started connecting the dots. The challenge was using the intelligence effectively while protecting the source, compartmentation, careful dissemination, making sure operational responses didn't directly reveal how we'd obtained the information. But that was Washington's problem. My problem was keeping Christina alive and operational. The near miss came in September. Christina showed up at our scheduled meeting at the Tier Park wearing the red scarf, emergency signal. I approached casually, acting like a random tourist asking directions. What happened? I asked quietly. Stasi security audit, she said. Her voice was controlled, but I could hear the stress underneath. They're reviewing document access logs for the entire foreign ministry translation pool, checking who accessed what files over the past 3 months. Shit. Did they find anything specific? I asked. Not yet, but I accessed some highly classified files that normal translators wouldn't have legitimate reason to review. If they dig deeper, they'll notice the pattern. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of. Christina had excellent access, but that access left records, electronic traces, audit trails, the kind of evidence that counterintelligence investigators could follow. Can you explain the access? I asked. Maybe I can say I was assigned translation tasks that required background research, but if they press hard enough, if they actually interview me formally, the story might not hold. We stood there in front of the bear enclosure, watching the animals pace their cages, prisoners, just like everyone else in this goddamn city. Here's what we do, I said. You go completely dark for 2 weeks, no document access beyond your normal assigned translations, no dead drops, no meetings. You become the most boring, routine translator in the foreign ministry. And if they interview me anyway, you tell them the truth, that you access those files for translation assignments. You maintain your cover. You act confused about why they're questioning you. You remind them who your father is. Using my father as a shield, she said bitterly. Using every tool you have to survive, I corrected. Your father's position is operational leverage. Use it. She nodded. We separated. I watched her walk toward the U-Bahn station, shoulders straight, showing no fear. This woman had steel in her spine. The 2-week pause was operational hell. No communication, no intelligence flow, no way to know if Christina had been compromised or if the Stasi security audit had identified her as the leak. Just waiting, watching, ready to abort the entire operation if she was arrested. Day 14, I checked the dead drop at the cemetery. Empty. Day 15, still empty. Day 16, I saw her at a cultural reception at the Palace de Republique. She was translating for a group of Syrian diplomats, moving smoothly between Arabic, German, and English, acting completely normal. She glanced in my direction for maybe half a second. No recognition, no signal, but her scarf was blue, not red. All clear signal. 2 days later, there was a film canister at the cemetery drop, 24 frames, and a handwritten note on cigarette paper, audit complete. They found nothing. I'm clear. Access reestablished. We were back in business. Over the next 8 months, Christina delivered more than 300 frames of classified intelligence, documents that exposed Soviet operations across Western Europe. Personnel files that identified Stasi officers operating undercover, communications that revealed East German penetrations of NATO facilities, intelligence that saved lives and protected operations. She became one of the most productive human intelligence assets the agency ran in East Berlin during the entire Cold War. A 26-year-old translator with access and motivation and operational courage that most trained officers never develop. But the operation couldn't last forever. Nothing does. The Stasi was too good, the surveillance too pervasive, the counterintelligence too aggressive. Eventually, they'd figure it out. Eventually, the pattern would become obvious. Eventually, someone would put the pieces together. And when that happened, we'd need to get her out, fast. The end came in April of '79, 11 months after the first recruitment, 11 months of exceptional intelligence, 11 months of operational success that was about to go straight to hell. I was in West Berlin when I got the emergency signal. Not the red scarf, something worse. A chalk mark on the emergency lamppost near Checkpoint Charlie that meant immediate danger and possible compromise. The mark that said everything is burning, Abort all operations. Disappear now. I crossed into East Berlin through Checkpoint Charlie at 9:30 that night. Business cover, routine commercial visit. The East German border guards checked my passport, searched my briefcase, waved me through. Normal procedure. But I could feel it. That operational instinct that tells you the environment has changed, that surveillance is intensified, that something is wrong. I walked to the emergency meeting site, a beer hall in Friedrichshain that we'd established as the last resort contact location. Arrived around 10:15, ordered a beer, sat in a corner watching the door. Christina arrived 20 minutes later, and I knew immediately something was catastrophically wrong. She was scared. Not anxious, not worried, genuinely goddamn scared in a way I'd never seen her before. She ordered a drink at the bar, then walked over and sat at my table without any pretense of operational security. They know, she said quietly. Not everything, not yet, but they know there's a leak. What happened? My father came to see me this morning. Not a social visit, an interrogation disguised as a conversation. He asked me about my work, about document access, about my relationships with Western businessmen. She was gripping her beer glass so hard her knuckles were white. He didn't accuse me directly, but he's not stupid. He knows I have the access. He knows I have the languages. He knows I've been attending events where Western intelligence officers operate undercover. Did he mention me specifically? I asked. No, but he warned me. Said the Stasi had identified a systematic intelligence leak from the foreign ministry, said counterintelligence was investigating, said anyone involved would be treated as a traitor regardless of their family connections. Fuck. This was the nightmare scenario. Not a random security audit, not routine counterintelligence procedures. A specific investigation triggered by operational compromises that had revealed the existence of a high-level source. When did this start? I asked. 2 weeks ago. Some operation in West Germany was rolled up based on information that could only have come from East German intelligence files. The Stasi traced the leak back to the foreign ministry. Now they're systematically investigating everyone with access to those specific files. And you had access? I had access. And I can't explain why I would have needed to review those particular documents. The operational justification doesn't exist. We sat in silence for maybe a minute. Around us, East Germans drank cheap beer and pretended life was normal while the Stasi apparatus ground toward its inevitable conclusion. We need to get you out, I said. Tonight, if possible. Tomorrow morning at the latest. How? They're watching me now. Not overtly, but my father wouldn't warn me unless they were already conducting surveillance. They're waiting for me to make contact with my handler. They're waiting for me to run. They're waiting for me to do exactly what we're doing right now. She was right. This meeting was probably being watched, photographed, recorded. Every word we were saying was evidence. Every minute we sat here was building the case against her. But we didn't have a choice. Because if we separated now, if I left her in place, she'd be arrested within 72 hours. Interrogated, broken, and everything she'd done, all the intelligence she'd provided, all the operations she'd exposed would be traced back and rolled up. The escape plan we established, I said. Treptower Park, 11 o'clock tomorrow night. Can you make it? If I'm not arrested before then? You won't be. They're building a case. They want to catch you in the act of espionage, not just arrest you on suspicion. That gives us maybe 24 hours. I explained the exfiltration procedure. She'd go to Treptower Park at 11 o'clock the next night, late enough that surveillance would be reduced, but not so late that her absence would be immediately suspicious. There was a service entrance to the park near the Soviet War Memorial that wasn't covered by cameras. A delivery truck would be waiting. She'd hide in a compartment built under the floor. The truck would drive to a warehouse in Lichtenberg where we'd transfer her to a diplomatic vehicle with immunity from search. From there, we'd get her to the British military checkpoint at Helmstedt and across into West Germany. Simple plan, huge risk, dozens of points where it could fail catastrophically. What about my father? She asked. I didn't have a good answer for that, because her father, Colonel Heinz Richter, true believer, loyal Stasi officer, would spend the rest of his life knowing his daughter had been a traitor, that she'd betrayed everything he believed in, that she'd used his position and trust to damage the system he'd dedicated his life to building. He'll survive, I said. He's senior enough that they won't purge him. But his career's over, and his faith in the system, that's dead too. Good, she said, flat, certain. Maybe he'll finally understand what he helped create. We left the beer hall separately. Me first, walking north toward Alexanderplatz. Her 10 minutes later, heading south toward her apartment. Probably the last time we'd see each other in East Berlin. I crossed back into West Berlin around midnight. Spent the next 18 hours preparing the exfiltration operation, coordinating with station, arranging the truck, establishing the diplomatic vehicle, building backup plans for when the primary plan failed, because it might fail. These operations often did. The Stasi was good at interdiction. They had checkpoints everywhere. They had informants everywhere. They had surveillance everywhere. But we had to try, because leaving her in place meant certain arrest and everything that followed. The next night at 11:15, I was in position near Treptower Park, watching, waiting. The truck was staged 3 blocks away with a driver who'd run this route 100 times. The diplomatic vehicle was ready at the warehouse. 11 o'clock came and went. No Christina. 11:15. Still nothing. 11:30. I started considering abort procedures. Then I saw her, walking quickly from the S-Bahn station, wearing a dark coat, carrying a small bag, alone, no visible surveillance. She reached the service entrance at 11:37, looked around once, slipped through the gate. The truck was there, door open. She climbed in, disappeared into the hidden compartment. The truck pulled away at 11:40, heading toward Lichtenberg. Normal commercial delivery. Nothing suspicious. I stayed in position watching for Stasi response teams, for interdiction vehicles, for any indication they'd been tracking her. Nothing. The truck reached the warehouse at 12:15. Transfer complete by 12:30. Diplomatic vehicle departed at 12:45 with Christina hidden in a sealed diplomatic pouch that couldn't be searched under international law. They reached the Helmstedt checkpoint at 3:30 in the morning. British military guards waved the diplomatic vehicle through without inspection. At 4:17 a.m. on April 19th, 1979, Christina crossed from East Germany into West Germany and became a free person for the first time in her life. The Stasi figured it out 6 hours later when she didn't show up for work. They raided her apartment, found nothing. She'd left everything behind: clothes, photographs, documents, every physical trace of her life in East Berlin. Colonel Heinz Richter was quietly reassigned to a desk job in Schwerin. Never investigated, never charged, but his career was over. His daughter's betrayal had destroyed his credibility within the Stasi hierarchy. And somewhere in West Germany, Christina started building a new life, free from surveillance, free from informants, free from the apparatus that had turned her country into a prison. Here's what you need to understand about recruiting assets in denied areas. It's not about ideology. It's rarely about money. It's almost never about adventure or excitement. It's about finding people who hate the system enough to destroy it from inside. Christina didn't betray East Germany because she loved America. She didn't provide intelligence because she believed in Western democracy. She did it because the Stasi had destroyed someone she loved, and her father had defended it. Personal motivation. That's what drives successful agent operations. Not grand political principles. Not abstract concepts about freedom versus oppression. Real, concrete, personal grievances that create operational commitment. And when you find someone with that motivation, someone with access, capability, and genuine hatred for the system they're embedded in, you build the operation around protecting them while extracting maximum intelligence value. That's the tradecraft. That's the art. Christina provided intelligence that exposed 47 Stasi operations across Western Europe, identified 83 officers operating under diplomatic cover, revealed Soviet active measures campaigns that were manipulating media and political processes in NATO countries. That intelligence saved lives, protected operations, gave Western intelligence services operational advantage in Cold War competition. But it cost her everything she'd known: family, country, identity. She could never go back, could never contact anyone from her previous life, could never reconcile with her father or explain why she'd done what she'd done. That's the price of intelligence work at this level. Complete severance from everything before. And she paid it without hesitation because destroying a system mattered more than preserving her life within it. That's operational courage. That's what separates intelligence assets from informants: the willingness to sacrifice everything for the objective. Christina spent 6 months in debriefing facilities in West Germany. Intelligence officers from 3 different agencies questioned her about East German operations, Stasi methods, Soviet coordination, foreign ministry procedures. She answered every goddamn question, provided details that filled gaps in Western understanding of how the Stasi actually functioned at operational levels, explained tradecraft techniques that counterintelligence had suspected but couldn't confirm. Then she disappeared into a resettlement program. New name, new identity, new life, somewhere in Western Europe where the Stasi's reach couldn't find her. I never saw her again after the exfiltration. That's how it works. Assets get resettled and handlers move on to the next operation. Clean separation. No emotional ties that could compromise future work. But I remember her. I remember that conversation at the Soviet embassy when she told me she knew exactly what I was. Remember her operational courage during the security audit. Remember her hatred for the system that had destroyed her friend and betrayed her country. The operation ran 11 months, produced intelligence that shaped Western understanding of Soviet and East German activities throughout the late 70s, demonstrated that even in the most surveilled environment in the world, human intelligence could still penetrate and collect at strategic levels. And it proved something I'd always believed: the most effective assets aren't the ones motivated by money or ideology. They're the ones motivated by revenge against systems that destroyed people they loved. Because that motivation doesn't break under pressure, doesn't fade with time, doesn't get compromised by doubt. It burns cold and focused until the objective is achieved. Every intelligence service in the world depends on human assets: technical collection, satellites, communications intercepts. Signals intelligence provides broad coverage, but it can't tell you what people are thinking, can't explain motivations, can't reveal decision-making processes that don't appear in electronic communications. That requires human intelligence, assets with access, sources who understand the environment from inside, people who can explain not just what's happening, but why it's happening and what it means. Finding those people in hostile environments requires operational patience, building relationships over months or years, establishing trust, demonstrating reliability, creating conditions where the potential asset feels safe enough to take the first step toward betrayal. That's what I did with Christina. 3 months of careful approach building toward a single conversation in the Soviet embassy garden where she admitted she knew what I was and why I was there. Then 11 months of operational discipline, dead drops, film canisters, document photography, security procedures, all the tradecraft that keeps sources alive while extracting intelligence value. The Stasi was good, best counterintelligence service in the Eastern Bloc. More informants per capita than any intelligence organization in history. Surveillance capabilities that made operation in East Berlin nearly impossible. But they couldn't prevent human beings from hating the system, couldn't stop people from wanting revenge, couldn't eliminate the fundamental vulnerability that every oppressive apparatus creates, the people it crushes who want to strike back. Christina was one of those people, crushed by watching the Stasi destroy her friend, enraged by her father's defense of that destruction, motivated by cold operational hatred for everything the system represented. That made her an ideal asset. Not because she was ideological, not because she loved the West, but because she wanted to hurt him and had access to do it. Intelligence operations at this level aren't about nations or governments or political systems. They're about individual human beings making decisions to betray the apparatus that betrayed them first. Understanding that, really understanding it, transforms how you approach recruitment operations. You're not looking for ideological converts or mercenaries. You're looking for people with personal grievances and operational access who hate the system enough to destroy it from inside. Find those people. Protect them. Extract maximum intelligence value. Then get them out before counterintelligence connects the dots. That's the operational logic. That's what worked in East Berlin in 78 and 79. That's what still works today in every denied area where oppressive systems create enemies from their own people. The Stasi thought surveillance prevented betrayal. They were wrong. Surveillance creates resentment. Resentment creates motivation. Motivation creates assets. Christina proved it. 47 exposed operations, 83 identified officers. Intelligence that shaped Western strategy throughout the final decade of the Cold War. One asset, 11 months of operation, intelligence value that justified every risk involved, and at the center of it all, a 26-year-old translator who hated the system that had destroyed her friend and was willing to sacrifice everything to strike back. That's human intelligence. That's what technical collection can never replace. That's why intelligence services will always need people willing to cross into denied areas, build relationships with potential assets, and run operations that can get everyone involved killed if they fail. I ran operations across 5 decades. Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, Middle East, Africa, Latin America, different environments, different threats, different operational challenges. But the core principles never changed. First, find people with access and motivation. Without both, you have nothing. Access without motivation creates risk without reward. Motivation without access creates noise without intelligence. You need both. Second, build operational security into every phase. One mistake exposes the entire operation. One surveillance team you don't spot. One dead drop that's compromised. One meeting that's observed. Any of those failures cascades into catastrophic compromise. Christina understood this intuitively. Never rushed. Never took unnecessary risks. Followed the operational protocols exactly because she knew her life depended on precision. Third, protect the asset above everything else. The intelligence is valuable, but the source is irreplaceable. If you burn an asset for short-term intelligence gain, you destroy long-term operational capability. We could have pushed Christina harder, could have demanded more frequent dead drops, could have asked her to access more sensitive files, but that would have increased the risk exponentially and shortened the operational lifespan. Better to run the operation at sustainable pace and extract consistent intelligence over 11 months than to push hard for 3 months and lose her to counterintelligence. Fourth, recognize when the operation is compromised and execute exfiltration before it's too late. The Stasi security audit was a warning. My father's conversation was confirmation. Waiting longer would have been operationally stupid. We got her out when the window was still open. 24 hours later, and she would have been under arrest. Fifth, accept that intelligence work at this level cost everything. Christina lost her country, her family, her identity, every relationship and connection from her previous life. She paid that price knowingly because the objective mattered more. That's what separates intelligence professionals from amateurs. The willingness to accept total cost for operational success. These lessons aren't theoretical. They're practical, operational principles proven across decades of running human intelligence operations in hostile environments. And they all came together in East Berlin in 78-79 with one asset who had the access, motivation, courage, and operational discipline to penetrate one of the most secure intelligence targets in the world. Intelligence work isn't about dramatic moments. It's about patient operational execution over extended periods, building relationships, establishing trust, creating conditions where assets feel safe enough to take risks. The Christina operation succeeded because we followed operational principles, took time to build the relationship, established security procedures, protected the asset, extracted her when compromise became likely. Simple execution, consistent discipline, operational patience. That's how you run productive human intelligence operations. And here's what you take from this. Successful intelligence work isn't about heroics or dramatic confrontations. It's about finding people who hate the system, giving them tools to strike back, and protecting them while they deliver intelligence. Christina wanted revenge against the apparatus that had destroyed someone she loved. We gave her the means to achieve that revenge. And in the process, we obtained intelligence that exposed Soviet and East German operations across Western Europe. Perfect operational alignment. Her objectives and our objectives were identical. Hurt the Stasi, damage the system, expose operations. When that alignment exists, when the asset's motivation matches the intelligence requirement, you build operations that produce exceptional results. That's the operational logic. Find people with grievances, provide operational capability, protect them while they collect, extract them before counterintelligence completes investigation. Execute those phases correctly, and you run successful human intelligence operations that produce strategic level intelligence. Christina proved it works, even in East Berlin, even against the Stasi, even in the most surveilled environment in human history, because oppressive systems create enemies, and those enemies, when properly recruited and protected, become intelligence assets that expose the apparatus from inside. That's intelligence work. That's what I did for 5 decades across every hostile environment the Cold War produced. Find the people who hate the system. Give them the means to fight back. Protect them while they collect. Get them out before they're caught. Simple principles, difficult execution. Exceptional results when done correctly. That's the legacy of operations like the Christina recruitment. Not dramatic, not heroic, just professional intelligence work executed with operational discipline and tactical precision. And in the end, that's what matters. Results, intelligence, strategic advantage gained through human sources who had access and motivation and courage to betray systems that betrayed them first. That's the operational reality. That's what worked then. That's what still works now. Period. Final word count to 7,990 words.